Like I said at the beginning of the program, we'll be looking at the Afcfta, the African Continental Free Trade Area, which President Buhari just signed a few days ago. After so much hula baloo, no, Nigeria shouldn't sign. We have things to sort out. And I must say that a lot of people still have concerns with Nigeria coming on board to sign after most countries have signed. But let me get your own assessment. Let me get your own view about it.
Yeah. I'm one of the people who said that Nigeria should have been in a position to sign when every other country was signing. But they say better late than never. So eventually we signed as the 53rd country out of the 55. And after that, Benin Republic signed. And I wasn't surprised because really, to Benin Republic, Nigeria is more important than any other agreement that anybody has to sign because the economy depends a lot on us. So now remaining only Eritrea on the continent. And the question is, Nigeria has been a part and parcel of the African Union in all the shapes and forms from the days of the Organization of African Unity. And that led to so many things. I think it was in 2002 with Thabo Mbeki, it became African Union. And this whole concept of trying to have a free trade area, dates back to 2012. Nigeria was a major proponent of that whole concept. So 2012 to 2019 is 7 years. Why did we not do all the consultations that needed to be done? Nigeria is the largest economy in Africa by GDP, by population, by potentials, by anything. If you are not on the table, you are most likely on the menu. So Nigeria should provide the leadership. And one thing I keep asking myself is, we have been with ECOWAS now for decades. Nigeria is about 50 to 60% of the whole ECOWAS region. And ECOWAS has actually progressed to a customs union. So just recently they're talking now about a monetary union with the introduction of ECO. It hasn't been introduced, but in principle it's been agreed. The question is, what are we afraid of? What are we doing to the other people in ECOWAS that we think others would do to us in the rest of Africa? We already have a union. It's not perfect, but there's some benefits. I can pick my passport today and go to Ghana without having to get a visa. So,
but is that okay? I don't want us to digress a bit.
Yes.
Because there are a lot of issues. Shouldn't it be more than just taking my passport and I can go to Ghana? I can go to other ECOWAS countries? Because if we see what is even happening in Ghana, though we say we have that ECOWAS, we have that customs union and all of that, but we still see some, silent refusal of those smaller countries in West Africa refusing us to do business in their country. For example, Ghana is just a very good case of it. Just was it last week or so, we saw what the Ghanaians were doing to Nigerians in Swami Magazine in Kumasi area of Ghana. Was it in 2010 or so? The Ghanaians introduced $300,000 if you want to do business to register. I was even reliably told by a Nigerian staying in Ghana that it's been increased to $1 million. So though we have that, I don't know if you understand where I'm going to. We have that union, or supposed let's unite, but other countries are still saying they're still putting things that will drag the union progressing, and ab initio having that larger. I hope you understand what I mean.
Yeah, I do, but the point is that Nigeria is even more guilty than any other country.
How?
So in Nigeria today, the Companies and Allied Matters Act says a foreign business or anybody cannot do business in Nigeria until you incorporate a subsidiary. If I'm in Nigeria, I don't have to incorporate a subsidiary. The minimum capital required for a foreign company is higher in Nigeria than it is for local companies. So I guess Ghana is just trying to retaliate. Anybody will do that. The big brother in ECOWAS is not treating everybody fairly and equally.
The Kama Act,
yes, the Kama, yes. So, and that's so many, I don't want to, continue with that, but the list is long of things we do in Nigeria that discourages other investment from outside Nigeria, including within ECOWAS. So if I'm a smaller economy like Ghana, I also want to try and protect my space. So if Nigeria provides that leadership, you see everybody opens up. These things would never be, perfect. Even within the EU, You find where, you go to the UK and they're complaining about people are coming from the rest of the EU, which is part of the reason why they have Brexit.
Yeah.
You go to NAFTA in North America, they have their issues. But you should only worry too much when it is institutionalized. You can't control how people and individuals behave, and there are 200 million of us, or 198 million.
I don't know who to believe now.
Yes,
for population.
But at least it's round figure 200 million.
200 million.
So you can easily have 200 million views as to how we deal with the rest of the world. But here is the point on, visa is not the most important thing, but it is important. And where you want to get to is where you want to have free trade and movement of people, goods, and services. For some reasons that is difficult to understand, Nigeria has focused so much on the trade in goods, and very little has been said about trade in services under the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement. Nigeria is largely a service economy. The service sector in Nigeria is more than 50% of our GDP. And that is one area where you don't need huge infrastructure or any major thing to be competitive. If you look at our entertainment industry, particularly Nollywood, it's hugely popular across Africa. You go everywhere in Africa, they're watching our movies, they're listening to our music.
Yes.
But our artists are not making money from it because there's no intellectual rights protection. This same Africa Continental Free Trade Area has huge provisions for intellectual property rights. So I have read the agreement from the beginning to the end, and I think there is absolutely nothing wrong with the agreement itself. Everything can go wrong with the implementation, which is where Nigeria needs to come in, be at the table to influence those policies, how they're implemented, so that we have a win-win situation for Nigeria as well as the rest of Africa. I don't think it's a zero-sum game where if Nigeria is gaining, then somebody is losing in Africa. We can all gain from this free trade area.
How about those that have concerns that we should sort ourselves out first? We still have institutional bottlenecks. We still have infrastructural challenges. We still have, a lot of things that are inhibiting our economic growth. So how about those that say, no, for Ghana, for example, Ghana has more stable power supply than Nigeria and other African countries. So that alone makes them more competitive than us. What do you think about those concerns? Are they valid? Or should we just throw them away with the baby and the bathwater?
Those concerns are valid. Unfortunately, the solution to them is not to refuse to sign the agreement. So, because as it is now, conceptually, when you have both tariff and non-tariff barriers to investment from outside your country, what you do is you impose additional tax on your citizens for local inefficiencies. So a bottle of water that I'm supposed to buy for 10 naira, if you allow free trade, I'm paying 15 naira because you say it must be produced locally. So that's an additional 5 naira tax on me. Now that tax is okay if only it's for short term. Because you say, well, Taiwo, you know what? We need to create employment in Nigeria and all of that. I'll live with that 5 naira for a while if you're going to bring efficiency into play such that I start paying 10 naira maybe in another 2 years. To be very honest, Nigerians are going to be the biggest beneficiary if we allow this thing to work. And what I mean by that is Nigeria needs to get to a point where we stop thinking and hoping that we can be everything to ourselves. We have the local content law in the oil and gas industry. We want to even produce vessels to drill. We want to produce cars. We want to produce aircraft. You can't do everything. Maybe what you need to do is focus on producing tires for all car manufacturers in the world. Maybe Ghana will have the competitive advantage in producing chocolates. Maybe Nigeria will say, you know what, why don't we even refine, instead of selling crude, we don't sell crude to anyone. We're going to refine all our crude and sell refined product to the rest of Africa and the rest of the world. If you take the African population together, it's about 1.2 billion. So you can easily compete with China and India. Each of those countries in Africa are too small for anybody to place a big bet on them. The big countries like Nigeria are not that organized. So under the Africa Free Trade Agreement, this is where Nigeria needs to say, why can't we position ourselves such that global organizations will come to Nigeria and build their headquarters for Africa in Nigeria? And out of Nigeria, because that's where the biggest market is, invest to the rest of the world.
Just like you're saying in the EU.
Absolutely.
Okay.
With the UK, for example,
That's
having a lot of the
yes,
HQ. That's
financial capital.
And if Nigeria doesn't do it, someone is going to do it. Now, we'd start playing cash up when it'll be too late. This is how to create massive employment and economic prosperity for ourselves, but we have to be strategic.
Now I see why you talked about implementation. What do you think should be the next steps now for Nigeria? Because I think it's quite critical that President Buhari has signed. Now it should not just be the funfair of, oh, he has signed it, and they all go back to sleep.
Yeah.
I think it should be, we are now on the table. We should also drive the discussion, despite that we were the 53rd African country to sign. They may not just take us seriously, but they may also take us seriously because we are a big brother on the continent.
Absolutely.
And for the fact that we have a population size of close to 200 million people, they should take us seriously. So what should be the next steps, especially for our leaders? Right now, perhaps it also falls on President Buhari's table because, as I know now, there are no ministers to drive this thing.
Yeah.
So we're already going further.
Yes. So the biggest thing we need to do now is to do an assessment. So that assessment says, this is where we are as a country in all areas. This is where we're supposed to be to maximize the benefits under this treaty. And you're right, under that Afcfta, we have provisions for Council of Ministers. Nigeria is supposed to be represented by the Minister for Trade and Investment. We have another committee for senior government officials. I'm not sure that Nigeria is already thinking about that. And what you're going to find is, the moment you don't plan your affairs to take advantage of the opportunity, somebody will fill the gap.
Yes.
By the time you start coming back, you're fighting forces unnecessarily. When you could have just placed yourself strategically. Ghana was very strategic in bidding for the secretariats.
Yes.
But good news is, we always consider them as our next door neighbor. We can always fly there for 5 minutes and say, guys, we can help you. So the idea would be to actually help.
Perhaps been the secretariat of...
We could have been, but we're not very strategic. So what Nigeria needs to do now is to make those assessments in different sectors. First, you're going to say, for trade in goods, where are my competitive advantages? Okay? Trade in services, where is it that I'm strong? Like professional services, Nigeria is strong. I told you about entertainment, we're strong. You're going to say investment promotion and investment policies, free movement of people and of product and of goods and all of that. Then even the institutions to support the implementation. That will come from their provisions under the treaty for dispute resolution. There are provisions under the treaty for protection of infant industries. There are those ones where you have preferential treatment that says, and this thing is not like, they're not saying, the African Union is not saying, forget about everything you're doing overnight. This is progressive. The language in the treaty is progressive elimination of both trade and, tariff and non-tariff barriers. So if you take our laws, Company and Allied Matters Act, tax laws, regulations, local content, all of them need amendments. And I do not think that, in fact, the things we need to do under this treaty is for the interest of the treaty, but actually there are things we should have done for the sake of Nigeria a long time ago. A long time ago. We have KAMA now, there's a bill. It hasn't been passed into law. KAMA is very old. It's not fit for purpose. It cannot deal with a lot of things. Some of it will be to do with digital economy. We're trying to promote SMEs, but do you know that in Nigeria today, if you are in the informal sector doing your business, and you want to fully comply, just from a tax point of view, you pay about 19% income tax. If you make the mistake of formalizing your business with CAC, your tax goes up to about 40%. Now, how does that make sense? When you're saying, let's promote, SMEs. So these are things that we should have as a country, even taking the time to look at and improve. But if Afcfta is coming to push us to do it, then that is a good thing. But saying that we don't want to do it, we have concerns until Nigeria is perfect, we will never make progress that way. By the way, I do not know of any free trade area around the world that is perfect. Even the EU, they're working at it. They have issues with their monetary union, from Greece to Italy and Spain. Yeah, but you learn from it, you make progress, and every single time, everybody is progressing, one step at a time. That is the way Nigeria should look at this.
Now, you've talked about the next step. I just want to bring you back a bit. Will there be challenges to the implementation? Bearing in mind that we also have different regions in Africa. You have the ECOWAS, which we've talked about earlier. You have the COMESA for the east side. You have the SADC, the South African, and you have, I think, the Arab Maghreb. So wouldn't there be, because even in Africa, we've, put ourselves in different groups according to the parts, perhaps where we are on the map of Africa. Wouldn't that also pose a challenge to the implementation and perhaps to the next steps that we need to take?
It might in the short term, but actually in the medium to long term, this Afcfta is solving those problems. So at the moment, there are 8 regional economic groups that are recognized by the African Union, including ECOWAS. If you take ECOWAS, for example, where in West Africa we have English-speaking, French-speaking, and that in itself creates the conflict that you find some of the English-speaking, the French-speaking countries in West Africa are in ECOWAS, and they're also with their own union. Because they align more with France.
Yes.
So that in itself makes it difficult to have some, collaboration and consistency. What the Afcfta is promoting is that let's start from what we have, the 8 regional economic groups, and take the best of us in each of the policy area, from rule of origin to how you deal with issues about free movement of people, and implement it on a bigger scale, such that over time, we do away with those smaller groups and just have one African Union free trade area. And I think that's a brilliant idea. In fact, even from a cost point of view, we don't have to then be paying subscription to different smaller groups if the bigger objective is that we all want to come together as one Africa. So I really think that Nigeria should be very excited about Afcfta. It's not perfect. We should work together with other big players, the South Africans, the East Africans, the North Africans, the leading economies in Africa. Nigeria should provide leadership for the leaders in Africa to say this is how we want to implement it. And as we stumble on those issues, there are lots of provisions in the treaty for us to address issues by way of protocols and by way of other agreements and resolutions. So, and ultimately, if we think that is not working for us, there are also provisions there to withdraw. For trading services, within 3 years, you can withdraw. For trades in good, within 5 years, you can withdraw. It's not like Nigeria is going to fall down and break up just because we signed this treaty.
So we can divorce.
We can divorce.
If we say that the marriage is not working.
Yeah, we just divorce and move our separate ways.
Like the UK is divorcing from the EU.
They had no idea how much benefits we were making from the union until they said they were going to leave.
They didn't know perhaps that the effects would be like this until that vote was done.
Yes. So now they're regretting it.
Wow.
So usually if you belong to a trade area and you manage it well, no agreement of itself is good or bad. It's what you make of it. If Nigeria makes it a good thing, then it's good for us.
Has there been even any trade area around the world that has been absolutely successful without? I think the EU?
The EU, I'll say, is my number one example.
Number one.
Yeah, I'll say it's number one example. Really? NAFTA is not doing badly until
America
Trump
first
came.
Policy.
Until Trump came, yes. So you find some of them and they keep improving on it, and then at the end of the day, you see that actually, being alone is not as good as being together. Especially in Africa where we lack so many things. If you take infrastructure, for example, which is one of the points you made that is making us so competitive, China is there. And they say, you know what, we got this money under China Belt and Road Initiative. If we come together now and say, now Africa, we are together, and you know what? Help us build infrastructure in Nigeria to service the rest of Africa. Those negotiations, we should be having them by now. So we just have to be strategic, we have to be proactive, and we have to think about a bigger scale when we're making our decisions.
Are there anything that worries you right now, the immediate? I know
Jones,
are there anything that worries you right now, the immediate that we need to sort out?
My biggest worry is that we don't look prepared, even though we have signed. I did not see that preparation from dealing with National Assembly, trade organization, regulatory authorities, government agencies and institutions. Customs is not even ready. Nobody is talking about capacity building. So my biggest worry is that we're not prepared and we're not even taking the step to be prepared. We don't even have ministers and then we've signed. And you'll be surprised that by the time you have the minister now, if it's a new person, they have no idea what has been done before. They're starting from scratch.
Right.
I'm sure if you go to South Africa now, they probably have a commission or a unit just focusing on this because it's that important.
I think Ramaphosa chose his ministers, I think 72 hours later.
Where I see her struggling.
Senegal to the same thing.
Yeah.
That's the smaller country, Malawi, to put up ministers within 1 week or 2 weeks.
Exactly.
And we're still struggling
When
with
we
that.
struggle with simple things like that, you can imagine how we're going to struggle with complicated negotiation and trying to understand what's in it for Nigeria and how can we put our position forward without looking like we're compromising the rest of the union.
I think that's a good place to leave it. Thank you very much for coming.
It's a pleasure.